Hey there, it's Jason from Codemanship with another video diary entry. And before we begin, if you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Okay, now a problem I see many teams facing is when they have tests or test code that knows too much about the design of the software. It's too tightly coupled to the design, whether that's the design of web pages or whether it's the internal design of the architecture. They know too much, and when they know too much, that makes it much harder to change and evolve that internal design over time, because we're having to rewrite a whole bunch of tests. It can also make our test code much more complicated. So what I'm going to demonstrate in this little video is a refactoring that I've done with many teams before who faced this problem of code that is too tightly coupled to the design. And the example I'm going to use is a web application where I've got a bunch of front-end tests. These are tests that use Selenium WebDriver to drive the application through the browser. And as you can see, we've got a bunch of test code here that is all about navigating to pages, finding elements on pages, clicking links, clicking buttons, and so on and so forth. And the problem with this is, as the design of our Guitar Shack shop web interface changes, we're going to have to keep rewriting these tests. It makes them very brittle and rigid, very difficult to change. So first of all, let me just demonstrate the tests that I'm going to be doing in these automated tests I've got here. So let's run this web application, and this hopefully will fire up a Chrome browser for us, or in this case, it's probably it's a Chrome browser. Okay, so there's our very, very beautifully designed front end. You can tell I'm a web designer. The idea is that we can go find products in our guitar shop, like the Epiphone Les Paul Classic, for example, a nice budget guitar. We can see information about it, how much stock we've got, what the price is, and so on and so forth. And if we click on this add to basket, it will add one of these from our stock to our basket. You'll see there that the item arrives in the basket. We can check to see what the total of the basket is. We can see how many of each item there are in the basket, how many items there are. And you'll also see, let's go to another product like our Ibanez Tube Screamer. We've sold out of that, so that add to basket button should be disabled. So those are the kinds of tests that I'm doing automatically with my Selenium WebDriver tests here. And as you can see, they're written at a very low level, at the level of the page design, the page elements. And I really want to hide all of that. So here's a little trick. I would say it's not so much a trick as a good idea. What we're going to do is we're going to refactor this test code to hide the details of how we're actually driving the application behind a very clean interface that we control, that describes the actions the user is performing, adding a product to a basket, creating a new basket, etc., and also allows us to extract information from the application without directly referencing its interface. And this, of course, doesn't have to be just a web page example. You can think of many examples where your tests know too much about the design of the code. So just take it with a pinch of salt here. Let's start with getting the total of items in a basket. You can see here, we've got, let me just extract this out to make it a bit more explicit. So let's go, give me a local variable, and we'll call it basket total for now. Okay, and this block of code here, its job is to get that total. So it navigates to the checkout page. That's what I was doing when I clicked on the basket link. And then it finds the total element on the page and then parses the value of that element to give us a number. So let's extract this into its own method. Yeah, we'll go with a property, actually sounds more realistic. And we'll call that basket total. That sounds reasonable. That's a good guess. Thank you, Ryder. Okay. So now we're not clicking on buttons or navigating to web pages. We're just asking, what is the basket total inside that test there? And we can probably clean that up a bit. We don't really need a local variable. So we're checking, is the basket total equal to 0? Let's apply those changes. And we've got a bunch of automated tests. You'll see as I run these. These are the tests that we're actually looking at now. And these are going to fire up a Chrome browser, go to navigate to the home page, navigate to other pages, click buttons, do all that kind of stuff, as you will see visually, hopefully now. So let's see that happen. Let's run all of our tests here. So as you can see, it's actually performing all of those button clicks and navigations that I would be doing if I was doing this manually. And so far, so good. Okay, all our tests are passing. That's good news. Now, we've used that code to get the total in multiple places. So let's go find some other places where we've asked for the total. So here we can just say, give me the basket total, please. Oops. We don't need that. So I'll do them all, I think. So let's go hunting for all of them. Total of 2 items. So at the bottom there, again, we ask for the basket total. Okay, which means we don't need to do all of that. Okay, and what else have we got? Total quantity of 2. So here we're asking for the basket total. Okay, which means we don't need to do all of that. So our tests are getting a little simpler now, just by removing or abstracting this one element. What's going on? Do we get the total there? No, that's something else. That's the remaining stock of the product. Okay, so I think we're good. Let's apply those changes. I'm not changing the web application itself, so it's just the tests that are changing at the moment. Let's rerun our tests and make sure that we're good to go. You can talk amongst yourselves while these tests are running. It's kind of fun to watch, but you can imagine if you had thousands of these, it would be a real drag. So that's a separate video we can talk about some other day. Okay, and we're good. All our tests are passing. So far, so good. Our test code is getting a little bit simpler, but there's one element in here. Let's go back up to the top where we add an item to the basket here. So all of this code here is to add an item to the basket, add a product to the basket. And that appears multiple times with different product IDs potentially. So let's put that in its own method and we'll call that add to basket. Oops, let's spell it correctly. To basket. Okay, and off it goes, a new instance method. So add to basket. And then what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to vary the product ID. So I'll do this now. Let's introduce that as a parameter. Why don't you not want to do that? Control RP. There we go. So we'll call that product ID. If you were a tester, of course, you would need to know what these products are, what the stock is that you've set it up with, and so on and so forth. Okay, and let's apply those changes. And let's rerun our tests. Talk amongst yourselves. How are you doing these days? We live in strange times, don't we? Okay, looks good. All our tests are passing. Now, adding products to the basket, that appears in multiple places. So now that we've got this reusable method, for example, total of 2 items there. So we're adding different products to the basket. So there's one with a product ID of 1. The basket, the product ID is 1. And then we've got another one that appears down here where we're adding a different product to the basket. So 2 different items. So product ID is 2. Okay. We can format the code in a little while. So we add 2 items to the basket. And down here, we're adding 2 of the same product to the basket. So it's slightly different bit of logic there. So yeah, so this adds product 1 to the basket once. And then the second part, we're actually going to add the same products are basically to the basket again. Okay, so adding it twice. And then at the bottom, yeah, Adding product reduces the stock. So again, that's product ID of 1. So our test code is getting much, much simpler now and hopefully much easier to follow. It can be very difficult. Oops, I've left a bit there. No, I haven't. No, that's the bit that actually gets the stock. And the last one, we don't actually add anything to the basket. That's a product that is out of stock, the one that I showed you earlier, the Ibanez tube screamer. So let's apply our changes and rerun those tests. It shouldn't be applying any changes to the web application, of course, but just to be sure. So I think what that apply changes does, I'm guessing here, but I think it kind of hot deploys any web libraries, any of the libraries you're creating, the components you're creating, hot deploys them into the running web application. Maybe. Okay, we're still looking good. All our tests are passing. One more to go. So there's a bit more we can do here to hide things. For example, what are we doing here? We're getting the stock of a product. So let's just pull that out into its own variable. Come on. Control V. Yeah. Computer's refusing to play ball. Control RV. There we go. So let's call that the stock count. Okay. And what we want to do essentially is call it M. Let's call it get stock count. Okay, and that's for a particular product. So I would probably, just before I run these tests again, I would probably just parameterize that, Control RP. So we'll call that the product ID, just so that it reads a little better, that we know which product we're talking about. Okay, let's apply those changes and rerun our tests. In actual fact, I'd probably get away with just rerunning that test, just to speed things up a little. In the real world, I'd probably run more tests. Okay, that's passing, great. So this sort of API is beginning to appear. Let's call it a facade, if you like, that allows us to work in our tests. We can inline that. Work at our tests at an abstract level. Add product 1 to the basket, get the stock count for product 1, etc., etc. So the details of navigating to web pages and clicking buttons, that's all hidden. Okay, can I add out of stock product to basket? So what we want to know now is whether or not a particular product, we can add more items to the basket. Product ID 3, that's the Ibanez tube screamer, if you recall, is out of stock. So first of all, let's out of stock. Oh no, add enabled. Okay, and again, what we'll do is we will extract a method. Add enabled, okay. And again, we'll qualify which product we're talking about, just to make it more readable. Okay. So again, when we go back to our test, it reads much more simply. Let's apply those changes and rerun our tests. something rather satisfying, something slightly cathartic about watching front-end tests being executed automatically. Okay, now we've got a bit more to do, I think. So here, when we get the stock count for the product, so there's this one here basically, which is the number of items in a basket essentially. So let's just, or rather the quantity of an item. So let's extract it all, pull this out of the way first. So Control RV, item quantity. And let's pull these out into their own. Again, we'll probably, in this case, it's not qualified by a product. It's just the only item in the basket. So we can do that as a property, I suppose, item quantity. Okay, and let's inline that to make it a bit more readable. And while we're here, what else have we forgotten to do? So add to basket, total single line. So all of our tests now, I know it's difficult to see because all of the helper code is embedded, but all of the tests themselves are written at the level. Actually, let's finish this off because we want to hide everything. So new basket. So whenever we open the browser, oops, yeah, can't call it that. Control R, let's call it a new session. Okay, and here as well, we want to hide everything from our tests. So in our teardown, we're quitting the browser that we're currently using in that test. And in the setup, essentially, we are opening a new browser with gives us a new web session and an empty basket. So again, we want to hide all of it. You'll see why in a minute. So let's just call that end session, close session, or whatever you want to call it. Okay. Let's rerun our tests and make sure that they're still all passing. Okay, oh, last one. Okay, all tests are passing now. Sort of clicked apply change. It shouldn't make any difference because I'm not actually changing the web application itself. Okay, now our basket test, it's still full of information. And now it's in helper methods, but it's still full of lots of information about how we're actually driving the web pages themselves. So really we'd want to extract these responsibilities out of here. So let's bring up our refactor menu and we can do extract class. Okay, now we need to be careful here. We want it, first of all, we're going to call this let's call it our basket driver. And we need that, and we need the home page. New basket is part of our setup. So new session, end session, all the stuff that is help code. Basket total. So none of the tests. Add to basket. All of the stuff that we extracted to do the actual work of driving the browser, driving our application, get stock count, add enabled, all of that stuff. Hopefully we can extract that into its own class target class member and session, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to make these public. You would hope it would know to do this automatically, so as not to break our code. Let's put it in its own file as well. So off goes our basket driver. You can tell I'm from the north of England originally because I call it a basket and not a basket. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and now it's really not very happy about that because what have we lost here? Add enabled. Is that by any chance private? Yeah, I had a feeling it might be. One that I forgot to do. Okay, so there's our test code now. Now it doesn't know anything about the web. It's all essentially about driving the basket. What do you not like here? Updating this type of field requires restarting the application. Aha! I need to stop our web server. There we go, and restart it. Okay, we don't need to worry about that. So now if we go back and run our tests, just to be sure that they're all still working. But you can see now that the level at which our test code is interacting with the application now has no involvement with the web interface at all. That's all been delegated to this basket driver, this helper class. And we control its interface. So we're able to design the interface in such a way that when we read our test code, it's describing what is going on in terms of user interactions, starting a new session, adding a product to the basket, checking the total of the basket, and so on and so forth. So it's written at a kind of abstract level of what is the user doing and what does the user need to know. Okay, that's looking excellent. All our tests are passing. Our test code now is way simpler. Way simpler. And if we wanted to write more tests for this, it would now be very straightforward to do that. And of course, as we add more and more test cases and more features, these helper classes, let's call them our test facades or test APIs, will naturally grow and evolve. That's absolutely fine, but they will allow us to keep the details of how to actually make the application do things, in this case through the web page. We'll keep that separate from the test code itself. Which means there's only one part of the code that knows how to add a product to a basket. There's only one part of the code who knows how to get the total of an item in a basket, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's my tip. There's more to it than this, and I'll probably do that in another video in another couple of days' time. Now that we've taken this first step, we can go further. But this is a big step forward. It really does allow you to decouple your test code very cleanly from the underlying design. Which has all kinds of advantages. So there you go. There's my first video diary in a while. I hope you're keeping well. Keep an eye out for more video diaries. It's a relatively quiet period over Christmas, so I'll be probably recording quite a few videos. See you soon.